I recently shared online about this bundle of 5 old consoles that I managed to buy for £40 from Vinted of all places. And whilst I did show myself giving them a quick test and that I was quite surprised to find that they all actually worked, I was less than impressed with the condition they came in, as they all looked like they were covered in many years worth of grime and dirt. So join me today as I attempt to refurbish one of these consoles. First, I'll be giving it a full teardown and then a good clean. Doing so, we will see if any surprises or issues lie within that need fixing, and finally, through testing some games, see the finished result. Now, and you might have spotted it in that little montage, I've chosen to restore today this Sega Master System 2, as I don't currently have this variant in my main collection. And for those who don't know, this is the second iteration of the Master System, released in 1990 to replace the original one that I have here, and the precursor to the later Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis as it's known in other territories. And this version of the Master System 2 that I'm going to be restoring today is the supposedly more common variant with the built-in Alex Kidd game that you can see here, instead of the Sonic one, which is the one the Centre for Computing History says is rarer. Although I will say, from what I've seen, the Sonic variant isn't that hard to get, it just goes for a slightly higher price. Anyway, that's enough of the backstory. Let's get to restoring this console. So to take this apart, if I just flip it over, I'm just going to remove 5 screws here, 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 and 2 up here and here as well. And as you can see, they're quite deep into the case. But to remove them, I've got my Phillips head 1 screwdriver. So I'll get all these screws out and I'll be back when that's done. Now I can just flip this back over, and I will say it was a bit of a nightmare getting those screws out with them being so deep in the case, but they are all out now, and I should be able to just lift the top of the case off like this and put it to one side, and I can immediately see that it is quite grubby in here. There's quite a bit of dust and also rust on this side as well. But the next step is to get this RF shield removed, and I can see a tab over here that I'll just lift up with this flat-headed screwdriver like this. There we go. And also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 screws that I'm going to remove now. So finally, to remove the board, I've just got 2 more screws to remove, which can be found on the cartridge connector here and here. And I'll start with this one. That's out there, and the second one. Like that. And then I should just be able to lift the board out. Now, as you probably saw, this board is pretty dirty, so I'm going to give it a bit of a clean. And usually I would just clean boards with some IPA and a cotton bud. However, this board is pretty caked in crud, so I'm going to give it a little bath with some distilled water. And I've also got an anti-static brush here to scrub it with. So let's get it clean. Okay, so whilst I wait for the motherboard to dry, I'm going to give the rest of the system a good clean, because I'm not sure how well it's going to be picked up on the camera, but it is rather grubby. But first, I'm going to take out the bottom of the RF shield. And the bottom of the RF shield is super easy to lift out because there's nothing really holding it into place. So I can just lift it up like this and it's out. Now things are getting serious, as I've seen how much gunk is around the button and the switch. So I've gone and put some gloves on to remove them, and they're held into place by some little tabs. So I'm going to get them out now.
5 minutes later.
Okay, so removing these buttons took a little bit longer than I thought it would, especially with this power switch, because it seemed like each time I was unclipping one side of the tabs, the other side was just clipping straight back in. But I got it out in the end, and you should definitely be able to see now just how dirty this is. Likewise with the pause button, which was held into place by a lot of grime in the case, which you can see here. And now it's all disassembled, it's time to move on to the fun part, actually cleaning the Master System. And to do that, I have a bucket of warm water here that I've just added some washing up liquid to. And I also have a selection of brushes and a sponge. So let's get this cleaned. So now the Master System is completely clean, and I will just quickly show you an image of what the water looked like after I was done cleaning, because it was absolutely disgusting. But now we can move back on to the board, and I have given it a good time to dry. And I will say I did notice while I was cleaning it that one of the joystick ports on here is slightly cracked. So I'm going to see if I can get that port replaced. I've just gone and raided my supplies for a replacement joystick port, and I've found this one that I had spare from a Mega Drive repair. And whilst it's not a perfect match, it should still fit. So the first step to get this old port removed is to flip over the board, and then I can just remove these two screws here. So the next step is to desolder the 9 pins, and to do that I've got my desolderer heated up to 380 degrees C, and I've also just added some flux and some fresh solder to hopefully make it a bit easier. So let's get desoldering. So the old joystick port is now removed. It did take a little bit of persuasion with some solder wick and the soldering iron, but I finally got it out. So now it is time to get the new port fitted. One thing I did note though is that this replacement port doesn't have any strain relief to the soldered pins, as it doesn't screw into the board. So I've just quickly designed in Fusion 360 a model which you can see here that I'm going to 3D print. To do that I've used my calipers to get the right measurements, and once it's printed it can sit on top of the new port to act as strain relief. So let's get that 3D printed now. Okay, we'll say that was pretty quick to print on my Prusa, as it only took about 9 minutes. And given it will be going inside the console, heat-wise I thought it best to print it in PETG. And the first roll I had to hand, which is rather fitting to the printer, was Prusa Orange, hence the bright colour. Anyway, let's see if it fits. And so far it looks good. The screw holes seem to line up. So the next step is to get this screwed in, ready for soldering. So that is screwed onto the board, and I'm really happy because it does fit super well. And it will just make sure that this joystick port is nice and secure to the board. And as a bonus, it'll also hold these pins into place, which will make soldering a lot easier. So let's get this soldered now. So that's now all soldered, and some of you eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed that I actually didn't have my extractor fan on for that. I'm normally really good, but I forgot to turn it on this time, which is definitely not something I want to do again, as it wasn't fun having the fumes blowing in my face. But anyway, now that port is replaced, before I move on, it's probably best to give it a little test. I've got my cables and a controller ready, so let's get it plugged in now. Okay, everything is plugged in, so now I can test that port that I just soldered on. So let's switch on the console. And Alex Kidd has loaded here, so I can start by testing the start button, and that works. They test this other button, yep, Alex is jumping, and the D-pad can go left and right and down as well. So that all seems to check out, and now I think I'm just going to get the console screwed back together so that we can give it a final test with a cartridge and see how good the Master System looks after its little makeover. Okay, it's all back together now, and I will say it's cleaned up really well. Obviously, it's still got some scuffs and scratches, which I think shows its history more than anything. And this button and switch, since having a thorough clean, now work effortlessly. And honestly, I can't even tell that the joystick port has been replaced. Plus, before reassembling, I did give the cartridge port some maintenance through cleaning with some of this contact cleaner. But it's time now for a final test with a cartridge, for which I've dug out some games, and I think I'm going to test it with one of my favourites here, Sonic 2. So let's open this up. I can put the game in here, get the controller plugged in, and also the console plugged in. So now we're ready to switch it on. And we have Sonic on the screen, which is a good sign. Let's just play a little bit of this. And great, it all seems to be working fine. Overall, I'm really pleased with how it turned out, especially given the console only cost me £8 to start with. As to the joystick port repair, I appreciate it's rather niche, but I will upload and share the STL file of the part I designed so you can print it yourself, plus where I got my replacement joystick port from, with links to these in the description. Also, let me know which Sega console you would like to see me restore next in the comments below. Plus, I would love to hear of any Sega Master System or Mega Drive mods I should check out and maybe make a video about in the future. And finally, games. Would love to hear what your favourite games are for the Master System, as always looking for recommendations of what to play next. Anyway, I'm now off to have a quick game of Sonic, so that's all for today. I'll see you next time.